the recording. So anytime you're ready.
I'm ready and willing.
Okay. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for being here. We are here to continue our discussion that began on, I believe, Monday, about the budget referendum. So we had some discussions as to the health and safety of having an election in June. And so I guess number one on our agenda is discussion of the ramifications of delaying the approval of the town budget. So Susan, you wanted to check with the others, who I'm assuming that's why they're here, to give us some information about that.
That is correct. We have the town manager, the finance director, the town solicitor, and the assistant town solicitor here. I don't know where my finance director went. Where did he go?
Find him?
He was here and then he was trying to reconnect differently. So I am looking to see where he
There he is.
Here he comes.
Okay.
We see a shirt, but no face. It's pretty funny looking.
Right. Right.
That is wild looking.
That's a ghost.
There is.
Someone ought to take a picture of that.
Wow. Scary.
Looks like someone out of Harry Potter.
You shut his video off.
But Zach, you're still there, right?
Yeah, he's not muted, so he's got to still be there.
Well, who's going to begin for us?
I mean, I'm happy to begin. And we can sort of go through Zach's slides. Even if we can't make the connection with Zach, we can sort of go through the information that he put together in preparation for this meeting. So Madam Chair, if that works for you, I'm happy to begin.
Okay, thank you.
And with your permission, I'd like to share a PowerPoint presentation.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, so this has been a tricky problem since COVID-19 first came on. And I want to acknowledge, first of all, that this is, a squarely big public policy problem. Public policy is defined as the sum of everything that government does, everything it chooses not to do. So whether we move a date is a big public policy question. If we don't move it, we've made the choice not to move it. And if we do move it, we've made the choice to do so. And that has implications either way. Keeping things the way they are, charter provision being our governing principle would have implications. We have to deal with those implications. And of course, moving the referendum would have other implications. It would have different impacts on town government and on the voters. When we think about public policy, we can think of three dimensions of public policy. There is the law, fact-finding, or the science of public policy, the evaluation of policies, and there's the politics. The legal questions, or the law part of public policy making, is really just a question of who gets what from whom. What's the allocation of rights and responsibilities, duties under the law? The science is essentially what are the underlying facts? How do we find out the impacts of a policy, or how do we determine whether a change in policy is warranted? What is the way that we're going to find the facts that determine the policies that we pursue? And politics answer the question, why have we come up with the allocation that we've come up with? So if law asks us or tells us who gets what from whom, politics tells us why. It's the justification for the allocation that's been established in law. There's a clear line between implementation and policy making. It gets fuzzy when you get closer to the line, but policy implementation is really much more about finding and law than it is about the justifications and rationales. Those are decisions made by policymakers. Those are decisions made by politicians, by administrators. So in my world, I try to stay over on this side of the line. I belong over here in law and fact finding, not over here in the politics and policy making portion. And that influences the way we approach problems, and I want to make sure that folks are aware of the fact that we're coming at this with a perspective as well. When we are dealing with policy implementation, we're asking questions like, what does the law say about the allocation of rights? We're asking, who has the authority to change the rule? We're asking, under what conditions can the rule be changed? When policymakers, or is the rule prescriptive, proscriptive, or permissive? That's another thing that we worry about. When the politicians or policymakers are thinking about policy, they ask questions like, who deserves the benefits of or relief from the rule? Not typically a question that we ask on the policy implementation or administration side. How should rights and obligations be allocated? Again, those answers come to us on the administrative side from the policymakers. We don't generally ask, how should the rights and allocations be allocated? Those rights and allocations have been allocated in the law, and our job is to faithfully execute the law. What is the justification for the rule? Again, policy decision, a policy-making decision. Is there a better rule? This is a big question for us in the current context. We have a rule. The rule is, and we'll see it as we go forward in the slides, the rule is that the election, the referendum election shall be on the Tuesday after the second Saturday in June. That is the rule. The question we're dealing with at this point is there a better rule? And that is a politics question. That's not a question that typically typically falls to administration. It's not typically a question that we deal with on the policy implementation side. And I think it's important for us to recognize that question, is there a better rule, is a political question. It will change the allocation of rights and obligations that's been established in the charter. Some people may prefer, in fact, we've gotten correspondence from some people who've said they would prefer to move the date out to July 14th as a common date that's been identified. We've heard from others who say they want to keep the election where, or the referendum, where the charter places it on June 9th. We're deciding, or contemplating deciding, we'll get to whether or not we actually can do that, but we're contemplating changing that rule, which changes who gets the benefit. Some are going to be winners. Some are going to be able to say, I got what I wanted, either the 14th or the 9th. Others are going to say, I didn't get what I wanted. This is a political question. But before we get to those things, I want to come on and talk a little bit about the law. And here I'm going to actually ask Mike or Amy to step up and sort of walk us through the next series of slides. I've pulled together some of the basic rules that apply to the question of when an election should be held and how a referendum question election should be held. The first thing to note is that our charter says that the canvassing authority has all that authority that is given to it under state statute. And Mike, Amy, if you want to step in and share what those powers are.
So the section you have up there right now, Rob, refers to the overall authority that boards of canvassers are granted. And as I think you go through the slides, we'll be able to see more specifically exactly what powers the board has.
That's correct.
These are just all general right now. So on the budget referendum, it just sets forth the time that the polls shall be open and what date it should take place. So all of that's sort of set in stone. This is where the local board has the ability to provide guidance on what the emergency ballot applications are all about and what the circumstances would be for someone to request an emergency ballot. We've obviously done this in the past. The state has done it, and this board has the legal ability to establish those procedures. Unlike, for instance, moving the date of the referendum, which requires council action, that would be an advisory request. This is something that the board has the power to adopt on its own.
So, Mike, I want to ask you about that because the idea that the canvassing board can set the emergency ballot is clear here. There's no doubt in my mind that they've got the authority under the charter and under the state statutes to define how emergency ballots are going to be given out. But on the question of the date, given the charter language, would a request from the canvassing authority to the town council be correct? Does the town council actually have the authority to supersede the charter?
So that's an area that we're very concerned about. We've had a lot of discussions about it, have done some research on this. Here's what my fear is with the date. The charter is the Bible, right? It's not an ordinance. It was duly adopted by the citizenry of the town of South Kingstown. The ordinances were put together by the town council. Very easy to suspend or change ordinances. I have grave concerns about suspending or changing charter provisions. And my main concern, in addition to just the legal ability to do that, is the challenges that will surely come. We all know, everyone on this meeting knows that this is a hotly contested matter. There are strong opinions on both sides of it. I don't want to place the town in a position after the referendum results come in where the town is going to be subject to legal challenges based on interpretation of the charter or the ability of the council to move the date. That'll be a disaster, frankly. Much safer to stick with the provisions in the charter, and that way it eliminates all those legal challenges later. I think what we should do is we should be accommodating to individuals who are in difficult circumstances with regard to voting in person, if they have underlying conditions, if they're elderly, etc. All of that we certainly should take into consideration when we set up the process for emergency ballots. However, changing the date is something that I'm advising against and extremely uncomfortable with. Rob, you're still...
I am muted. I am unmuted now.
You're unmuted now.
Thank you, Mike. So I want to just continue through and my view of this and you know, we've talked about this as well, Mike, and I've talked to this with Susan and others. I think that you're right about this. I think that the idea of changing the date is problematic. And the further we move it, the more problematic it becomes. The more you change or the more you move from an established charter provision, the thinner the ice becomes. So I think that that's problematic. The voters have decided, the people of town have decided that this Tuesday after the second Saturday is the right day to have this. That's built into a whole budget adoption process, a whole set of procedures that were designed to make sure that we had the orderly administration of government programs. And I want to turn next to Zach to sort of just describe the post-budget adoption procedures and implications of changing the date from an administrative point of view. This isn't so much a legal problem. This isn't necessarily a conflict with the will of the people as expressed in the charter, but it does create challenges on an administrative level. Zach, are you there? We don't seem to have Zach. So, Susan, do you see him? Okay, I'm going to proceed through his slides. His point here simply is that if an operating budget is not approved by the town by July 1st, the town council may authorize continuation of operations. There is actually a procedure adopted or identified in our charter that tells us what to do if we don't have a budget adopted. So we can, in fact, proceed. We could proceed if we were in this situation, but it does impact how we proceed. It does impact the ability to get work done. It does potentially impact our mailing of tax bills, and depending on our cash flow position, could potentially cause problems fiscally as well. We could go out and issue notes in anticipation of taxes. Tax anticipation notes, or TANs, would require us to spend money on interest, and it's not necessarily a huge expense, but it's an expense that we avoid if we stick with the charter provisions. I'm going to talk a little bit about that third element on the dimensions of policy making or policy consideration, and that is science. The science here is an important thing for us to take into consideration, because what we're trying to respond to is fear about a virus. And the question becomes, how much do we have to fear, and what is it? What is the nature of the fear we should have? What's the harm that we're trying to avoid? We have had a significant impact here in Rhode Island. There's no doubt that COVID-19 has had a significant presence and has been a problem. It's a problem worthy of our paying attention to, trying to address. However, it's also worth noting that we in South Kingstown are not, the sort of hot spot that we've got up in the northern part of the state. The vast majority of the cases that we're seeing in the state are from the northern part of the state, not from the southern county. In fact, here in South Kingstown, Kingston itself, for zip codes, has had no cases whatsoever. We are not without cases. I don't want to make light of what we have experienced, but we are not as big a hotspot as the northern part of the state. The trend for cases and infections is going down. We're sort of on the downside of the slope, or it appears that we're on the downside of the slope here in Rhode Island and in South Kingstown as well. And if we look at the projections that the state is making, the difference between June 9th and a date later in June is somewhere statewide, at least for hospitalization, somewhere between 10 and 50 or 60, depending on how far out you go for hospitalizations. It's 50 or 60 difference at sort of a max number. If you talk about the decline that the state is anticipating, their potential decline, their best estimate decline in cases puts us at about 60 case differences, 60 hospitalization differences between the 9th and the 19th, 50 or 60. And that's statewide. And again, remember, we've not been the hot spot. So the trend is in our favor. But we also know from reports around the globe and from reports around the country that as you reopen, as mobility increases, you see spikes. So the reopening that's happening now and the reopening that we're going to see over the next several weeks has the potential to cause spikiness, and this smooth decline that we're seeing in some of the projections could become much more jagged. That puts us in a funny position with regard to trying to figure out whether the science supports sticking with the charter or not, because we may in fact be at the best point somewhere around July 9th. We may be at a low point, and if we see a spike because of return, we might actually be better off going early rather than later. It's a very difficult thing to predict. No one has been willing to give us, a solid, yeah, we think everything's going to be fine in Rhode Island kind of prediction. But the best case scenario, I suppose, if you want to think about it this way, is that going on the 9th, avoid a spike. So we're actually better off. The worst case scenario is that going on the 9th is the spike, that just after Memorial Day, that's the spike. And the likely scenario is that we're going to see something close to this smooth decline, so that the 9th is not better than later in the month, but is not terribly worse than later in the month. Now, if we think about what the virus we're trying to deal with actually requires us to do, CDC yesterday came out with a new description of what it sees as the mode of transmission. What they're saying at this point is that the virus is spread person to person. The surface contamination mode of transmission is probably not a major issue. People get COVID-19 when they are coughed on, sneezed on, or talked to by people who are infectious. We know that the infection isn't always symptomatic, so that's a huge challenge for us as we go forward. We need to make sure that we're keeping people safe from other people, whether they are apparently sick or not. But we're not talking about contamination by surface contamination. We're talking about airborne droplets. If we can keep contacts between people to a minimum and shield them from respiratory droplets, then transmission is prevented. That's what CDC and the Department of Health here in the state of Rhode Island tells us. So how do we do this? We can do it by spreading people out in a big indoor space. That's what we will be doing on the PPP. During the presidential preference primary, we will have voters who show up at the polling place on June 9th in the rec center. They will be indoors. So we're spreading people out as much as we can indoors. And as far as the charter and our referendum goes, this is the closest thing to what we have normally done as these other options. This is closer than any of these other options. We could, however, spread people out along the sidewalk outside of the rec center. We could spread them out, around the parking lot in a long line, 6 feet between each person. Another option is for us to keep people isolated from each other by keeping them in their cars so that they don't come in contact with other voters. And I'll show that possibility in a couple of slides. If we do mail-in, we avoid a lot of the contact. In fact, mail-in ballots is without a doubt the safest way. It's the least contact way to deal with this virus, because nobody's interacting with anybody unless they're actually meeting the mailman at the door. There's no interaction. These are sort of in gradation, I suppose. Mail-in is the best. Keeping people in their cars so that they don't come in contact with other voters is better than having people outdoors where they're 6 feet apart because they may come in contact with each other. And that's still better than being indoors with 6-foot spaces in the building. Outdoor spaces, we're finding with more research, is definitely better. The winds dissipate and sunlight definitely does kill this virus. These are definitely better than the way that we have historically done it. even if we're spreading people out. And mail-in is probably the best. Keeping people in their cars is probably the second best. And spreading people out is probably the third best way to deal with it. So how many people do we have to deal with if we were to do this entirely as a traditional kind of physical polling place thing? In 2009, we had 4,400 voters show up at the referendum. That's the last time we've had a budget referendum in South Kingstown. It's a pretty scary number to me. I mean, we've got 6.1 voters per minute that we've got to process. This really does counsel against just doing spreading out in the indoor space. I think that we need to figure out how to move into the outdoor space and whether we need to go to a vehicle sort of queuing system makes sense to me, and we can talk about that. If we do that, if we were to just have folks line up, and if we assume that we can have parking in one area near the front of the building, let's say down in here, we could assign 15 parking spaces, and we have folks queuing up in the parking lot, pulling into their parking space when it's their turn to vote, and walking in, doing their thing, coming back out, getting in their car and leaving. We can accommodate about 40 voters in this parking lot alone. Now, we also own and control the property on the other side of St. Dominic Road. We can accommodate cars by queuing them in the senior center parking lot, and we can accommodate cars by queuing them in the dog park baseball field parking lots. We could queue better than 200 vehicles in this way. So if we wanted to go with a drive-by, for want of a better expression, a drive-by voting system where we've got folks coming in, queuing up, staying in their cars, listening to the radio while they're waiting to get to their polling places, and then parking, going in, doing their thing, and coming out, we could probably keep everybody absolutely out of contact with anybody other than the folks who are handing them the ballot in the polling place. Politics is not my thing, so I'm not going to say much about it, except that the politics are really about balancing contested material and cultural claims. And foundational documents like constitutions and charters are the most clear expressions of the cultural bodies, the cultural values of the body politic of the people. And I'm very reluctant to move away from them. I think that our duty here is to make sure that we do everything we can to keep people safe, but not change the dates, not change the fundamental way that we do this election. Now, there's also a tool available to the canvassing board that I think is really powerful. The canvassing board has this authority that Mike has talked about to set the rule for how emergency ballots are made available. That's where we have a chance to sort of reduce the number of people queuing up outside of the polling place. And I would encourage the canvassing board to look for a liberal application of the emergency ballot program or initiative. I think it makes sense for us to try to make ballots available to folks who do not want to go to the polls because of fear of COVID-19. That having been said, I also do believe, absolutely believe that we can safely administer an election the week after we've successfully administered a presidential primary in the same space. Madam Chair, I'm done with my presentation at this point.
There we go. Can you hear me now? Thank you. Thank you very much. So I guess the next step is to discuss whether we should be having the budget on June 9th. I do have some concerns that are last meeting on Monday, we were advised by legal that we absolutely could move the date and to protect the safety of the voters, the safety of the public. And I actually clarified that, and yes, she confirmed that we could move the date. So I guess I'm wondering what has changed in the week.
So Christine, let me respond to that. First of all, the Board of Canvassers never had the power to change the date. Only the town council could do that. You would have the ability to make a request or advise the council of that, and you still do have that ability to advise them that that is your request. With regard to my earlier comments on why I was fearful of doing that, is because during the petition process, there were several petitioners that came to the town and asked that the charter requirements with regard to gathering signatures and the dates for getting the petition in be waived. And the answer was no, because again, we didn't want technical challenges to this election or referendum following the whole process. So to be consistent, my advice to this board as well as the council will be, we didn't allow changes to the petition gathering process or the petition due dates. Similarly, we are recommending against changing the date of the election. Having said all that, yes, people who are concerned about the COVID crisis have the right to apply for an emergency ballot, and I would recommend liberal rules along those lines. But getting off the legal for a second, there's going to be no difference in July or August than there is today with the COVID crisis. It's not going to go away. COVID's not going to go away until we have a vaccine. We're still many weeks out from having enough I'm losing the term, but antiviral, whatever it is, to treat COVID. So given all of that, and given that that's not going to change, I don't want to see us changing the charter provisions and having to deal with what's going to come thereafter, because I guarantee you that there will be a lawsuit following this. So those are the reasons. We didn't change the petition process. We shouldn't change the date process. That'll be the recommendation. Now, at some point, could the council say, we heard all that, they're going to do it? That's up to the council at that point.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yeah.
Mike, I'm curious. I mean, I don't love the idea of putting the council on the hot seat here, to be honest with you. I'm still not convinced that anyone has the authority to modify the charter. In conversation with you, I've observed that the governor changed the presidential primary. It was a statutory change. It was a statutory provision. It was not a constitutional provision. She's been very careful not to try to interfere with constitutional rights, the right to access the beach, the enforcement of restrictions on travel. All of these things have been very gently done. I'm nervous that we are considering an authority that is challengeable, which you've noted, but I think it's also, it's not necessarily safe for us to be thinking about the council doing this either. I mean, it's been argued to me that I've got the authority because of the emergency declaration. I'm not even clear that the emergency declaration gives the manager the authority to do this. I think that the charter is sort of beyond change, and I'm nervous about it.
Yeah, well, the charter is our constitution. It's not an ordinance. As I mentioned earlier, ordinances can certainly be changed or suspended. We're really going down a difficult path if we try to change the charter. I don't disagree, Rob.
May I be heard, Madam Chairman?
Yes, please, Pat.
Thank you. I have inquired, first of all, a long, long time ago, I was a old-fashioned town moderator for 2 terms in South Kingston. And back in those days, we had the annual financial town meeting. And eventually what happened was, because of the size of the community and the size of our budget, it just didn't work out. I probably had a major role in doing that in one of the last meetings where so many people attended, it had to be moved from the high school auditorium up to the gym at URI. You had over 4,000 people. I'm just alluding to that by saying that I've been around for a long time, and I've seen, as Helen DeSanto has seen, all of these
Right.
various and subject things that have come before our town, and people trying to amend the budget, et cetera.
Right.
I have inquired, Mr. Ursulo, with legal counsel myself because of contacts, and spoke to a person who has been a solicitor in another community in this state, city of Warwick, and asked him about state law, which gives the authority to local canvassing authorities. And under Title 1785 of the general laws, it pretty much says that the local canvassing authority can can decide when elections are going to happen. Now, the state law, I realize that we're talking about a charter that is the constitution for the town, but does state law preempt? If so, does it preempt the local town charter?
No, and I'll tell you why. Because our town charter amendments were ratified by the Rhode Island General Assembly.
That's correct.
And therefore, that ratification means that our charter trumps that state law. That's the simple and quick answer to that.
Okay.
Okay.
But it's a good
Well-
question, though.
Well, it's beyond getting back, I mean, ultimately, as a member of this Board of Canvassers, we have to, everything has changed in terms of everything in our lives is completely upside down, or not totally upside down, but like everything is very, very different. And we're in situations where a lot of the state laws and town ordinances are really being violated. I mean, you can get I was amazed to hear just yesterday that apparently you can go to a restaurant and pick up a cocktail and take it home with you. I mean, that's in violation of, I don't know, about 10 state laws and town ordinances.
Right.
We have changed substantially how we live, how we act, and what we can do. 25% of the community, in this community, are supposed to be over the age of 65. I don't know if that's accurate. I am, but whether I'm not thinking of myself, I'm thinking about all of the senior citizens, and from the people who have contacted us and spoken to us and said, look, we need some time to vote in this election. If you take the date of the 14th of July, it's 55 today. It'd be 55 days from today. It would give an opportunity for the citizens of our community to file for a ballot, an absentee ballot, not an emergency absentee ballot. If you use what the state uses, actually last Tuesday was the last day for a mail ballot application, and the emergency ballots went into force. That's 13 days in advance. If we were to go on the 14th of July, it would put us in a situation where they'd have the whole month of June for the voters to make their choice on whether they want to vote in an absentee, as an absentee. And I think a substantial number of people will. 5,400 people have applied. Missy, what's the number?
It's 5,641 Mail ballot
5,000 is- okay.
applications have already been processed.
I know I'm making you cringe when I say that, because I know that you're gonna have another 5,000 people and you're gonna be doing this. And it's a lot of hard work for the staff. But the fact of the matter is, I mean, we've got to look at reality here. This COVID virus has completely changed everything. And if the town if there's a lawsuit, there'll be a lawsuit. We're the board, we're here to establish elections. And so if we vote and say that we think it should be on the 14th, then go to the council and do what they want. But I can't sit here and make a statement to this town, to the people of this town, and tell them that we're gonna jam this thing through on the 9th of June. Can't happen. No, sir.
I'd like to add to that, Pat. I agree with you. These are not normal times. We are under a state of emergency declared by our state and our town. I spent a lot of time this past week going to the Secretary of State website. She had a Facebook panel discussion last Thursday about voting in Rhode Island during the pandemic that I went back to watch. I wasn't able to participate last Thursday, but I did go back and watch it. And her whole premise was, obviously, they've moved to the presidential preference primary, and they've moved to a predominantly mail ballot. Now, we're not talking doing that, but they moved to do that because it ensures, quote, that all eligible Rhode Island voters can cast a ballot in a safe and secure manner. Safety of the public, safety of the voters was a primary concern during the pandemic. She also stated that they're working on, discussions are underway with the Department of Health to adjust the process of candidate declaration and nomination papers that happen in June to remain safe and healthy. And she also discussed the changes are being considered to the fall elections. Quote, "It's a challenge to think that they will run as usual due to this highly contagious virus." So I think we're living in a bubble if we just think that it will be fine in South Kingstown. We're all fine. Two out of the 3 members of this committee are healthcare professionals. So I think that we are also aware of health concerns of a pandemic. And messages for the last couple of months have been to stay home, stay safe. And I'm also then, so that's part of the health and safety of the public is my main concern. The other concern I have is the timeline for this. The petition for the referendum was filed on time, which was May 12th. It took almost a week for us to meet to certify that. So that happened on May 18th, which was, I believe, Monday or Tuesday. At that meeting, we were told at that meeting that it would take 2 weeks for the ballots to be printed, which brought us to the first week of June, which left about a week to use the emergency mail ballot process if we kept the date of June 9th. That is when the discussion came up to potentially moving the election to a later date. So citizens, voters could use the emergency mail ballot option. Now we've waited till the end of this week, used up this week. So if it is moved forward to have the election on June 9th, this is a holiday weekend. The Board of Elections, I would imagine, doesn't begin printing these until next Tuesday. That's 2 weeks until June 9th. I'm not even sure we'll have the ballots on June 9th. So now you've taken away from what I can understand the timeline that was presented to us to have emergency mail ballots. So I think there's 2 things going on here, a timeline crunch and the health and safety. I don't want to disenfranchise any member of our community that would like to vote on this issue. And again, these are not normal times, and there are lots of emergency measures being put into place, including at the Secretary of State and Board of Elections for the state of Rhode Island. So,
Christine,
yes,
I'd
Helen.
like to make a statement that I agree with both you and Pat. We need to be most concerned about the safety and well-being and the health of all of our citizens. And crunching this all together, if that's all been stated, I'm not going to go through it all again. But we need the health and safety in this time with this pandemic. We need to do what's right and get this done the proper way. So the safety and health of everybody, and everybody still has the right to vote. I agree. Thank you
And,
both.
we're talking that, this is not what's in the charter. Well, neither are Zoom meetings in the charter. We're all meeting by Zoom meetings.
That's
Why are
right.
we doing this? Why aren't we all meeting in person?
Good point.
That was good.
Ah.
No, I agree. We need to do
I
that.
I would ask that, first off, Madam Chairman, that we go to, we made some substantive changes and minor but substantive changes in the ballot, the draft ballot, from the draft to what was sent to us. I'd move that we approve that at this point, but I would approve it for change of the date from June the 9th to June the 14th, 2020.
I'll second that.
Can you repeat that, Pat, please?
Yeah, can you
Sure.
repeat that?
I would move that the town clerk to print the ballot, or official ballot for the town of South Kingston of the budget referendum election for Tuesday, July 14th, 2020. As amended, what I'm saying on the amended, the change that you made, that we made from the ballot that was originally sent in the draft. Minor change. Is that enough for you, Susan? Is that okay? That
I'll
motion?
second it.
Yes.
I don't know if you would like to have any discussion. I don't know if we have members of the public attending before we take a vote, or would we like to hear from, are there any members who might like to speak?
Christine, are you looking for the public in the waiting room, or are you looking for your canvassing members to speak?
Well, I guess canvassing first. I think they've both spoken, though. They can speak some more. Or if there's any public members in attendance.
Okay, we do have a few people with their hands raised. If you would like, I can let them in the order that they are listed.
Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
all right. Alicia Moniz has been recognized to speak.
I just drank some water and then
Hello, thank you for allowing the public to weigh in on this, and I want to thank all of you for all of your thoughtfulness in this discussion. It is a difficult challenge, as is every decision that's been made to keep the public safe during this time. I guess, I don't know if this is a stupid question, but what are the implications of the town getting sued for not following the charter?
So,
This is Mike Ursillo. It could reverse the decision. It could force a new vote. Not sure what a judge would do.
Okay. But worst case scenario, we're looking at another vote down the line.
Could be.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
so just to add to that, that further delay though would mean we are more likely to become cash constrained and would in all likelihood require us to go look for financing to continue the operations of the program.
Okay.
So it does interrupt the administration of the program.
Program. Okay. Yep. Very good. That makes sense. That was all I had. Thank you again.
Thank you, Alicia. I've also been reading some other towns are obviously considering these sorts of things. Do you have any information on other towns postponing financial town meetings or I don't know if the League of Cities and Towns has been discussing this. I've been reading some in the paper about other towns. Obviously, we're not alone
Yes.
into ourselves.
Yes. So the league actually, and this is part of my concern, that the authority isn't even vested in a local authority to change the date. The league has been actively engaged in discussions with the governor for weeks, months now, on getting the timelines changed for financial town meetings and for budget referendum. The governor has declined to say we're going to change the dates. She's been very careful not to step in and say, I have the authority to change the dates, which is part of the reason why I'm not at all sure anybody's got that authority. If the governor doesn't have that authority to change what is a state statute, then it's not clear to me that local authority, any local authority has that ability either. The guidance we've gotten most recently from the governor's office yesterday was to provide relief for financial town meeting communities in terms of the number of persons in attendance, not in delaying the dates. The way that the governor's office and the way the state has been managing the challenge is to try to figure out, one, yes, delay with regard to the presidential primary, but two, now that we're seeing the economy open, now that folks are no longer under stay-at-home orders, they're using what they're calling a community mitigation approach. How do we make sure that as people have to interact at financial town meetings, at referenda, in the grocery store for that matter, how do we make sure that we're providing the best protection? And again, there are very reasonable ways to go about doing that. Mail-in ballots are one way to prevent people from interacting with each other. Keeping people distances, having plexiglass shields between the poll workers and voters. There are other ways to protect people from the COVID virus that don't offend the Charter or the Constitution.
Thank you. Susan, are there other members of the public?
Susan, you're muted.
Luke Krastowski has been allowed in to speak.
Yes, hi. Thank you so much. I just would like to commend the Canvassing Authority for how they've handled this and are handling it. I think both the safety of our voters as well as the ability to provide the voters with the right to exercise their vote are both, very important considerations. I would hope the likelihood of a lawsuit would be minimal, if any, based on the thoughtfulness that the Canvassing Authority is giving to this matter. So I would like to thank you and commend you for your efforts.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, we have someone who's simply identified as an SK resident. I would ask this person to identify themselves before speaking, please.
Hi, this is Jerry Ann Chapman, and I just wanted to, I've been watching and listened to everything. Can you hear me?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
No, can't hear you.
No.
No. I can't hear her.
No, I can't either.
No.
Well, she is not muted.
Okay. Well, maybe if she's able to Call back in.
Tara is next in the list.
Tara, who?
Tara, would you identify yourself, please?
Yep, this is Tara Apperson. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I can hear you.
Okay. Thank you all for all of the work and the discussion. It's unfortunate that you even have to be put in the position to make these decisions at such a difficult time. I just want to say that I like the town manager's proposal for the drive-by voting. I do think it provides the safety measures we need. And I'm very concerned that the canvassing authority is considering completely disregarding the advice of the town manager and the town solicitor. I know it's a tough decision to make, but I do think that we should move forward with having this referendum on June 9th and not take the risk of potential lawsuits and potentially spending more money on top of what's already having to be spent to hold this referendum in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Dorald Beasley. Dorald, please unmute yourself. There you go. Oh, no. Dorald, you're coming through very garbled. You want to hang up and try again? I'm going to disable his talking until he calls back and tries to get a better connection. Lauren Weinstock is next in the list.
Hi, I just wanted to express my thanks for the careful discussion that you've all had today, weighing the language of the charter, so recognizing that the decisions that are being made in the context of a global pandemic, which was most likely not on anybody's minds at the time the charter was written. So to even try to chart out the path of the illness or the rate of hospitalizations in some ways seems unnecessary to me, because it's a much larger picture that we're talking about in terms of public safety. And I share concerns about, as Mr. Shanley said, jamming this through for June 9th and giving us time to get this right, to promote the safety and well-being of all of our citizens, while also allowing them the opportunity to exercise their right to vote on this important issue. And I just wanted to express my concerns about that, and say thank you to everyone for this important discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else, Susan?
Let me try and see if we can get Dorald again. Dorald, you're up if you can unmute yourself. Dorald.
He's probably gone.
I can't unmute him.
Madam Chair, I'm going to have to leave this meeting. I have another commitment at 12:30, and it's going to take me some time to get to the location I need to be at. One thing that I would suggest and ask that the board do is detail the facts that are the basis for whatever decision or recommendation the board makes today. I think that knowing the specifics of the rationale may be helpful to us as we proceed. The fact that we're in a pandemic is known. The particular things that the board is concerned about would be helpful. With that, please know that whatever the board's decision is, I'll work with Susan to faithfully execute the decision made by whatever authority we think has the ability to change the date. I will defer to Mike and legal counsel on what that is, whether the board's decision is really got to be an advisory decision to the council or whatever it is. But I will work with Susan and her team to make sure that whatever comes of this discussion, we faithfully execute as we go forward.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zabriskie. I think you made a great presentation. And
Thank
certainly
you.
Thank you very
gives us
much.
a lot to think about.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we have this pandemic and it is public safety. I don't want to see anybody get sick, and I don't want to put anybody in a situation. None of us want to have anything that would jeopardize the health and safety of the people in our community. That's it. That's all.
I agree with Pat.
Tell that to the council. I know them all.
So my suggestion would be that it would be helpful to know the specifics, that we find that it's more likely than not we're going to have a decline, that, you know, things that are going to help us explain why the 14th of July is better than the 9th of June.
Well, tell the council it's French Independence Day. We can all sing Martha Marseillaise. We'll have the Marseillaise playing in the parking lot.
No, you can't sing. That spreads the virus more.
Oh, that's true. Thank you, sir.
Very good. And thank you very much.
We can play the record.
And thank you very much for your commitment to serving the public well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I just would like to say that we would request the Board of Elections to expedite the printing of ballots for June 9th, if that is the decision that gets made, so that we would have them a week or so ahead of the actual date of the referendum, so that if people had requested mail ballots in the meantime, they could be sent out or picked up at that time. It may cost us more money to expedite the printing, but if that is the decision that is made at the end of all of this, we will do our best to make that happen in a timely fashion.
Madam Chair, can I?
Yep.
You want to print 2 sets of ballots, June 9th and July 14th? Is that what you? No.
No.
No. If the decision is made to hold the budget referendum on June 9th, we will ask the Board of Elections to expedite the printing of the ballots, which may come with an added expense for the printing costs, in order to have the ballots a week ahead of time, so that people could vote by emergency ballot during the last week or so before the actual date of the budget referendum.
I'm not getting what you want to do.
Well, I think we have a motion on the floor. I think we have a motion on the floor.
Yes, you do.
Mr. Shanley, to have the referendum on July 14th. And I believe it was seconded by Helen.
Yes.
Yes.
I don't know if there's any further discussion. Are we ready to take a vote, or?
Clarify to make sure we have it right. The official ballot, Town of South Kingston, is to be on Tuesday, July 14th, 2020. And that is amended from the draft as presented to the board via email this week. Is that okay?
I think it's more than just correcting the ballot. I think it's also having the election on.
Well, yes, but
Yes.
Yeah,
Well, the date is listed on the ballot.
right.
So the date has to be determined before the ballots get printed.
Yes.
And you do have 3 more people now with their hands up. If you would like to acknowledge them before you vote, or would you like to
We
vote?
haven't voted yet. No, they can still, absolutely, they should talk.
Okay. Dorald is trying to get back in again, so we will attempt to allow him to talk. Dorald, you need to unmute yourself in order to speak. And he's not doing it.
It's not working.
Okay. Let's put him back for a moment and take the next person in line who is a phone number.
Hello, can you hear me?
Please
Yeah.
identify yourself.
Yes.
Doral Beasley.
Oh, that's you. You're on twice. Okay.
Sorry. There's only
Hello.
one of me. Okay,
We can hear you now.
all right, great, all right. I wanted to start off by saying, really appreciate Mr. Shanley, conversation I had with him yesterday, and that he told me about this meeting. I've been listening very carefully. The problem I have, well, the reason we're here, even having this discussion today, is because the town council and the school committee had multiple opportunities after the middle of March to go back and modify the budgets that they had created. Because after the middle of March, all the way till the 28th of April, or 27th to 28th, when the town council had their final vote on the budget, they had several opportunities to say to the public, to say to the townspeople of South Kingstown, yes, we do know that there's a pandemic. We do know that many of you may have lost your jobs, but they decided not to. They didn't do anything, in my estimation, because what they ended up doing was had a discussion between the town council or the town manager and the superintendent, and their solution was to do this kind of, we'll take some unassigned funds from the municipal side and we'll throw them into the pot so we don't have a tax increase. This is not a year, ladies and gentlemen, where we need level taxes. This is a year when we need reduced taxes. Just look at what's happened in our state. Our state's what, $800 million in the red right now. Okay, that wave of red numbers is heading our way. It's a South Kingstown. There's no way that the town manager and the town budget and town CFO or Mr. Ursulo can tell us definitively that we're not going to be affected by the fact that this state is $800 million in the red. Okay, so that's why we're here today. That's the only reason why these the petitions were put out to the public, because they disregarded entirely the problem that people are having in this town. Okay, so that's my soapbox part of it. Now, when I sent an email to the town council earlier this week, and the way I read the town charter, it certainly gives the town council the authority under the Emergency Powers Act to create an ordinance, and in that ordinance, they would have, as far as I'm concerned, they would have the ability to change the date through that ordinance. Now, emergency ordinances kind of disappear after 61 days after they're adopted. So it wouldn't be something that they would be able to say, from years, well, you had emergency ordinance last year, well, you don't have it this year. It's a year-by-year basis, and it's not obviously something that's done willy-nilly. But this year, this time, with this pandemic, with 25% of our town age 60 or older, with with single parents that might have to drag their kids to the rec center, you know, it just doesn't make, it makes no sense. So what I was hoping for, that we could go to a mail-in situation where you could ask for a mail-in ballot. Now, if you're going to push this all the way out to July 14th, to me, that gives us plenty of time to go to mail-in ballots. Why, you know, in Washington, D.C. right now, we have an administration and a party that are doing everything they can to suppress people going to the polls. They don't want, when the President of the United States says he doesn't like mail-in ballots, he says that he's saying that for a reason, because he knows that would help people get to the polls that he doesn't want to get to the polls. So it's no different here in this today in South Kingstown. We need to make this as voter friendly as possible. If we're going to put it out almost 2 months now away, it seems to me we have plenty of time to do this with a mail-in ballot. So you would notify the people, all the voters, that mail-in ballots are available. If they say they would like a mail-in ballot, they get one and they vote by mail. And people don't want to vote by mail, they can go to the polls. But let me see, I think I'm almost done here. And I don't, as far as the lawsuits go, I don't foresee the people that have put in the two petitions. I don't see that side of the argument challenging anything after the votes are done, no matter what the date is. I think those people would probably say the people have spoken. I don't know about the other side, but I doubt that the school department, I doubt that the school committee would challenge this in court, because they are sitting on like $2 million worth of savings because the schools are closed. They don't really have it. They don't have a leg to stand on. So they're not hurting for money, and they're not going to be hurting for money in the fall. So that's pretty much what I got to say. Thank you so much for putting up with me trying to figure out how to call you guys.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Can't hear you, Susan. You're on mute.
I was muted. Okay, next we have Stacy Bozzioni.
Hi, this is Stacy. Can you hear me?
Yes, you can.
Great, thank you. So I have two questions that I'm hoping the town solicitor can answer for me. Is that appropriate?
Sure, no problem.
Okay, so the first one is, I'm wondering if there's a possible conflict of interest if there's a member of this committee whose spouse circulated a petition for the referendum. Does that pose any conflict?
We've looked into that issue, and because the referendum outcome is going to affect every citizen throughout the town equally, we do not see a conflict.
Okay, good. And my next question is, so if the committee votes today to send this recommendation to the town council for the July date, if the town council does not allow, will it even be possible to revert back to the June 9th date?
That's a good question. The council can call a special meeting on 48 hours notice. It can do sooner than that in an emergency situation. So I will begin working on that this afternoon, assuming that the board adopts the motion that has been made a little bit earlier in this meeting.
Okay. All right, thank you. And thank you all for your hard work here. I know that no one ever anticipated having these discussions when you signed up for this job, and I really appreciate it. Be well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next is Jess Jeremiah.
I want to thank you also. I think this is definitely something that you guys have put a lot of thought into, and all of your comments, all of this whole meeting has been very, very thoughtful. I would also, though, like to kind of reiterate what the town manager said about having a strong backing for changing the charter, because it seems like you're presented with a way to keep people safe. Also, the possibility that it may not be more safe in July. With schools letting out before then, there may be more mingling. We may see more spikes. We just don't know that can be defended. It may want to think about other grounds like promoting out what the referendum's about. That might give you a little bit more backing in moving the date if that is what you choose. So if you do it just on grounds of public health alone, I'm concerned that might be too thin of a reason to change a charter. Thank you very much for all of your time you put into this and consideration.
Thank you. Anyone else, Susan?
We have an SK resident, their hand up. Could you please identify yourself?
I've been muted by the host. It's okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So this is Jerry Ann Chapman, and I've been watching quite a bit. And what strikes me the most is that this is really not a political decision, that the duty of the board, the canvassing authority, is to make sure that the elections are held so that every person in the community has the opportunity to vote in a safe manner. With 5,600 mail ballots already in hand, I mean, I think that's pretty much evident that this community wants the opportunity to vote by mail. The problem is that opportunity will not be afforded to us if you continue with the June 9th meeting. If it was possible to vote by mail and hold the election on June 9th, there would be absolutely no reason not to do that. Absolutely no reason. The reason that we have to do that is because we have to afford the time to do that. We are in a state of emergency. We have changed everything. I think those who, it's clear to me, those who don't want the petition passed want this to happen right away because they think for some reason that that's going to be on their side. Otherwise, why the question about should, one of the people on the committee be able to vote because they were supportive of the petition? It has nothing to do with whether you want the petition to pass or not. This decision should not be made on those grounds. This decision should be made on whether everyone is going to be given the opportunity to vote, not whether the disease is going to be progressed or not. Everyone needs the opportunity to vote. And the only way that that's going to happen is to schedule this at a time when we can get the ballots back from the Secretary of State. We have time to apply. We have to apply for a mail ballot. We have to receive the mail ballot. We have to fill out the mail ballot. And then we have to post the mail ballot. You have to give us time to do that. You need to make the decision on those lines. Any elected official, appointed official who decides otherwise is doing it based on politics. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have our council president, Abel Collins. I'm going to bring him in to speak.
Okay.
Everybody, this is Abel Collins. Thank you all for meeting today and discussing this topic. I wasn't really intending on making comments, but to me, there's a lack of clarity in what's happening here. First of all, I have not, although I appreciate that July 14th is Bastille Day, I have not heard the argument of why July 14th is the date. To me, the charter says that the budget referendum will be on a Saturday. So why?
No, Abel, this is Mike Ursillo. It's the first Tuesday after the Saturday.
Oh, okay. Okay, sorry. Thought I heard that it was Saturday.
No, Tuesday.
No.
That makes more sense to me then. And then the second, I mean, I've heard some comments from public comments here. Some seem to be assuming that moving it out means that we're going to be having mail-in balloting, but I did not hear that as part of the motion. So what I'm wondering is moving it out to July 14th in anticipation of allowing mail-in balloting? Was that the date that was determined that would make that feasible? And I guess this is a question for Susan to a degree. Like, is there a date before then that would give us enough time to do mail-in balloting, you know, in June sometime? You know, in terms of keeping the budget rolling along, we would like to do this as early as possible. So if there's an earlier date where it's possible to do mail-in balloting, I'd want to know if that's possible.
Abel, anything is possible as long as it's at least June 9th in order to give us the opportunity to actually get the ballots. A normal emergency ballot period in a regular election is about 2 weeks prior to an election date. So if we went out 2 to 3 weeks from the June 9th date, we certainly would be within the normal emergency ballot period that the state would have. So if you picked a date at the end of June, for instance, get my calendar and look at
June 29th, Susan.
June 30th would be
June
the last,
30th, I'm sorry, right,
be the
June
last
30th.
Tuesday in June. That gives you 3 weeks past the charter designated date for this budget referendum.
All right, thank you. And that would give, I know one of the concerns that it would be very hard logistically to do mail-in balloting for June 9th, but you think in terms of, you know, your duties at the clerk's office, you think it would be possible potentially to do that for June 30th?
There was, Abel, there was some discussion at our last meeting that also is a holiday week.
At the end of that week.
Yes.
At the end of that week.
Right.
Yes. Well, there's no clean time to do this. The prior week begins the declaration of candidates, which is another whole election process.
Right.
Mail ballots are time consuming to process and receive and mail out. It will be more costly than what we have budgeted for a budget referendum because all of the expenses associated with the in-person all-day budget referendum are going to be incurred because we still have to have that all-day budget referendum regardless of what the emergency ballot process is. So any additional printing envelopes, postage for mailing, overtime for staff to process these mail ballots is all going to be in excess of what is budgeted for.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else, Susan?
Yes, I have some more. One moment. Jocelyn Leska, I will bring her in to be able to talk.
Good afternoon, everyone. How are you?
Hello.
Hi, I hope you all are well. I want to thank you for all of your consideration. It's, this is only the second time I've done this in the 35 years I've been home. And it's never gone this far. I'm a little surprised that it did go this far and that the town council and school committee didn't reconsider in light of the pandemic, but they did not. That said, I think that we budget between $13,000 and $15,000 a year for referenda that has not been used in at least 10 years, maybe a few more. So we have about $150,000 sitting in undesignated funds that should be, could be used for the taxpayers of South Kingstown to voice their vote, to voice their concerns. And I want to let you know that this referendum is not really about amounts, or it would have been a whole lot more. This is about what I heard as an individual in my small circle of friends, just screams of protest that budgets were increased, discretionary funds were tapped into despite a worldwide pandemic, and a majority of people in South Kingstown who are now jobless. Some are homeless. Landlords don't have rents coming in because they're being told they have to forgive for tenants who can't pay, which is both humane for the tenant but extraordinarily difficult for the landlord. People are in real trouble right now. This could have been stopped. Town council chose not to. So the people have a right. This is a civic right to exercise our vote at a referendum. No referendum has been put forth. There's well over $150,000 in undesignated funds that was budgeted annually for the voters to exercise their civil rights. So I don't care when you have it, frankly. Just give the people of South Kingstown the right to speak. They're going to feel better. Either way this goes, whether the budget passes as approved or the referenda is successful, people will have had the right to vote. And I want to thank you as well as the other folks who have thanked you for your very careful and thoughtful consideration of all this. I know Susan and I had spoken several times. I can tell you that there were literally cars lined up in front of my home waiting to sign. I personally stopped mine at a certain level when I knew we had 250 signatures. If we had kept going, I would have walked in with 500. I just want you to know that. We stopped it when we were sure we had enough to get it through, out of respect for the town clerk's office, not to turn in papers that had been touched by many, 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 many people. And we were so careful about infection control. So I thank you kindly. I want you to know what the drive was behind the petition, and it was simply to let people have a voice. So however you do it, just get it on so we can get moving and have a summer. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we have one more person, Christy Fish.
Hi, this is Christy Fish. I just wanted to take this opportunity to say thank you, as everyone have. And with all due respect to a couple of people that have spoken, I did not see this as a platform to speak about why we have the referendum and why it was created. This platform is to decide when the referendum will take place. People were not asked to speak as to why it was created, although I appreciate that. I think the bottom line is we have seen for the past few months that we have been forced to be flexible in all situations and accommodate all people. This should be no different. And I don't think the date of June 9th or July 14th truly impacts anyone on either side, as I've listened to people speak to being for the referendum and against the referendum. And so the political aspect that Rob pointed out, although I appreciate how detailed he was of some people are going to be happy and some people are not, should have nothing to do with this. This is about a date and providing people with the opportunity to vote. And to echo what Jocelyn said, giving all people the voice and the right to be heard. That is what this is about in shifting the date. It is not about what the referendum speaks to and about the town and the school creating the budget. It is about changing the day of the vote so that everybody has the ability to do that. That's all I would like to say. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else, Susan? I can't hit, you're still muted.
I'm sorry. Did we have Christy Fish? She just spoke.
You just spoke.
All right. Dorald is in line again if we want to try to let him speak one more time, or he's had his turn. It's up to you.
What do you all think? Are we ready, Pat? Helen?
Well, are we ready to, somebody else want to speak or wants to speak again?
Doral, I guess, have Doral again.
Citizen can talk, or not.
Thank you.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Mr. Beasley, come on now.
Yes,
No,
sir.
we've been very reasonable. I've been very reasonable with you.
I just have one question. Is there a difference between an emergency ballot and a mail-in ballot?
Yes.
All right, so I'm just.
What we're proposing is emergency ballots would be people who, for whatever reason, after the 30th of June, between 30th and the 14th of July, would apply for an emergency ballot. Other people prior to that could file for a mail-in ballot. That's all. It's just a procedure. That's all, sir.
All right, no, I just didn't know the difference. Thank you. I'm good.
Okay.
Helen,
Susan, would you agree with that?
do I agree with it?
No, Susan, because there was some discussion of emergency.
Technically, no. Technically, an emergency ballot process is for people to come to the town hall, request an emergency ballot, and vote it at that time. That is due to the nature of them having missed, under a state election, they would have missed a mail ballot application period. And for whatever reason, cannot get to the polls on election day. And so they come in and vote ahead of time just during that short period. The town charter does not anticipate a mail ballot process. It anticipates an emergency ballot process only. Perhaps due to the time frame in which the whole charter budget referendum process was designed, it is designed with the urgency of getting a budget adopted within the normal constraints of a fiscal year, and there being only a limited amount of weeks between the time that a petition is filed, certified, and ballots are printed and delivered to the town in time for an all-day in-person budget referendum. So there is a difference.
Okay, but we did talk about this at our last meeting, what procedure we would have. And that would be that the application would be available to print out online and could be dropped in a Dropbox, because the town hall isn't open for people to come in and vote. So we did have, I thought we had a discussion at our last meeting about this.
I thought we did too.
Yeah,
I thought the process would be that you would put ballot applications at various locations in the town. At the rec center, at several places. You mentioned them, plus here at the, for the public to pick up.
You requested that we make those applications available to the public for people to pick up. And I indicated that we have a public box at the Peacedale Library with forms in it, as well as meeting notices. And we have an outdoor box at the town hall with forms available to the public in it, as well as a locked drop box for people to put mail
Right.
into for the town to receive.
Right.
Now, for the presidential preference primary, the process we have been approved to do is to have people call and make an appointment to come to the town hall to vote an emergency ballot for the presidential preference primary. We are still doing that at the door because the town hall is still closed to the public at this time. So we could do the same type of a process for emergency ballots for the budget referendum.
All right.
But we have always made available on a limited basis ballots to either be hand carried or mailed to persons who were ill and unable physically to get out of the house to go to vote at an all-day referendum in person.
Right.
But it was not anticipated as a major mail ballot campaign. It
No,
was on an as-needed, as-requested basis.
Right. I understand, not in the same way that the presidential preference primary was mailed to all voters and then they had the opportunity to apply. However, if someone chooses to apply, they could receive it in the mail. And again, having nothing to do with the pandemic, if someone is bedridden, if someone is blind and doesn't drive to town hall, they're able to receive a mail ballot, correct?
Correct, yes.
Yeah. Okay, because again, I spent some time, Secretary of State's website, it is a right to vote by mail in Rhode Island, so.
That's correct. You are correct.
Very good. That's definite.
Okay.
Yeah, my point on the emergency ballot and the change would occur on the end, at the end of June on the 30th for that last 14-day period would allow for accommodation for, basically I thought it'd be an accommodation for the staff. I mean, look, you got over 5,000 people are going to vote in this, you know, are voting by, apparently by mail ballot in the presidential election. And the number appears to be 25% of the voters are elderly and are supposed to stay in the house. We're going to get a lot of people who are going to apply.
Right.
They have to bring it down to the town, and you know, if we have to have an application brought into and put in that box, then it's going to happen. But the whole idea of this is to accommodate people to give them more time. You know, that's what we're talking about. It's not about whether we can't do it on the 9th or the 14th of July. It's a question of accommodating the voters.
So that we don't disenfranchise anyone.
Exactly.
That's all. I mean, you
Give
know,
everybody a chance, the right chance to do it.
didn't say it was going to be any fun.
Oh, well.
I guess our motion should be, or our, what we should consider first is the date of the budget referendum, which is a
Correct.
little different than the motion you made, Pat. So I
Okay.
think we have to determine what we would like the budget referendum to be. So do you
You want me
want
to
to
make it?
rephrase your motion for that?
Okay, I would be happy to. I would move that the budget referendum for the town of South Kingston be held on the 14th of July, 2020. Would that be appropriate, just in the date, July 14th, Tuesday, July 14th, 2020?
And do we have a second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None.
None.
Okay, and it would be next the consideration of the emergency ballot procedure for the budget referendum.
Could I interrupt, Madam Chairman?
Yes.
Pat, can you just make a second motion now, though, to adopt the ballot as amended with the date, just so that we have the ballot, and then you can go to the emergency.
Okay, I would, amend that the ballot as amended be changed to the date of July 14th.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None.
Okay, Michael, may I ask, these motions and votes by the canvassing authority are to request the council to consider these votes and the will of the canvassing authority to make a final determination of the date of the budget referendum?
That's correct, and I'm realizing the council is meeting Tuesday, so we'll make sure we get this on the agenda for Tuesday. Next Tuesday, the 26th.
Good.
If the count, I'm not going to say anything. The 26th, you're going to meet with the council. Okay.
Right.
Well, Monday is the holiday, so.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, fine. Good.
Okay, and third on the agenda, consideration of the emergency ballot procedure. I would recommend, well, I guess it depends, but I would recommend that as soon as we're in process, that we begin accepting applications for emergency ballots.
All the way? You mean you're saying to do it from the moment that?
Yes, because I don't,
approved.
we're going to
Okay.
I don't think we'll have the two categories of mail ballots and emergency ballots. So I
Well,
would,
there's a substantive difference in the sense that with emergency ballots, the voter comes in and presents the emergency ballot, puts it in the box, and
but
then
they're not going to do that.
they're not going to put it in the box. We're not going to vote. There
It's
will be a
called-
voting machine in the clerk's office. When that wouldn't happen?
Not during the pandemic.
No, not now.
No.
No, I'm saying, wouldn't you put it in the box outside? Wouldn't the voter put the ballot?
The emergency ballot. Yes. So we're going to let Missy speak to that just a moment.
So what we're doing now is we give them a choice of taking the ballot with them, voting in at home, mailing it back to, it would be us in this case, or they can leave it, vote it and put it in the drop box.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
So if they put it in but after that, Missy, the ballot goes into the clerk's office when the voter is no longer in the building, not going to come in, and the vote, and don't you at that point feed it into a voting machine, or you store it?
No.
No, you don't wait until you.
At the end of the day of
Okay.
the budget referendum, if you will recall, the last time we had this budget referendum, Christine's there. Shut your volume off. The ballot, the emergency ballot applications are open.
Susan, we're getting feedback because both of your mics are on.
Volume's not on.
That's all right. I'm muting Misty. We should be better now.
Now we can hear you.
Okay.
No. The ballots are fed into a voting machine on the day of the election by the Board of Canvassers. They are
Okay.
held in the locked vault in our office
Okay.
or in a voting machine that the Board of Elections may provide us, and we would put it in the locked compartment of that voting machine, but they would not be fed into a DS-200 to be counted until the day of the budget referendum.
Okay. So that follows the draft procedure, when you send us the emergency ballot
Yes.
procedure for voting for I've got the 2 pages, and that's
Right.
basically what would happen, correct?
Correct.
Right.
Okay. So do you need a motion on that? I suppose you do.
Question, but conceivably, I know we're calling it emergency ballots, but conceivably, if somebody was home bedridden, they could request a ballot application, send it to you by mail.
Yep.
You would mail them the ballot, and they
Correct.
could mail it back to you.
Correct.
They could do that.
Correct.
Right.
Thank you. Just want to be sure.
Yeah.
Okay. My concern is, I'm hopeful that things work out our way, and it is July 14th, but if the council changes it back to June 9th, and we have no opportunity for emergency ballots, is there any way to extend emergency ballots after the election day?
No. How can you do that?
I
I don't know.
think.
I will say that once the council makes a determination of the date, we can make the application publicly available. People could file their applications, and as soon as we receive the actual ballots, they could be mailed out immediately to those applicants.
Okay.
And it would be their responsibility to vote it as soon as possible and return it to us by the deadline.
Good.
So,
Yeah.
so even though they had told you 2 weeks, which works out to be June 9th, you think you'll get the ballots before then?
From this point, we can request an expedited printing. Whatever it's going to cost, it's going to cost. That's out of my control, but I believe that we'd be able to request expedited printing under the circumstances.
I would hope so.
Okay. So where are we? We had a motion for
A
emergency
motion for
ballot.
the, I would move that the draft, as stated by the emergency ballot procedures for the budget referendum be approved. That's the 2-page draft that we received now. That after reading that, it does pretty much what Susan has told us. So I'd move that. We approve the
I second
emergency
it.
ballot procedure, okay?
I
All in-
second it.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Okay. Approval of the minutes from the May 18th meeting.
I so move that we approve them.
Second.
Of course, I had a note somewhere, but it's not on my copy I have here. So I guess we will just go ahead. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Matters of concern. Any other matters of concern?
Covered a lot. Let
Um,
me see.
I have a couple of things about the presidential preference primary, and then I guess would continue on through to the referendum, because I went to the poll workers class the other day, and they're preparing for social distancing and all of that. They did say that some towns were having plexiglass dividers of their own installation. I didn't know if we are going to be having plexiglass dividers for the poll workers.
Yes, I have already ordered and received 10 of them for the poll workers at the PPP. We may need more of them for the budget. If we, for an all-day budget referendum, we may need more because we will probably have additional poll workers beyond what we will have for the PPP, but we'll have to decide that.
Okay.
Oh,
And
that's good.
I think you were.
They are not cheap. They're $125 each.
And then the other thing, I think, Susan, you were at the same class that I was, that someone mentioned, will there be hand sanitizer for the voters coming in? And they said, no, we're providing it for the poll workers. But I thought, couldn't we get, one of those portable hand sanitizer things as the voters walk in the door so they could sanitize their hands upon entryway? It's on a little stand and.
Yeah,
I can look into that. We will have to provide all of the PPE that will be necessary for the poll workers for
No, I
our election. The Board of Elections is providing it for poll workers at the PPP, other
Right.
than the shields, which we have already bought. But we will be responsible for providing whatever PPE we determine is going to be necessary or
Yep.
advisable for the budget referendum.
Yeah, but I just thought in addition, the hand sanitizer on a stand so that voters, when they enter,
I agree.
would be a helpful, helpful addition.
Look into that.
Yes, I agree. That would be very.
Well, the state is, as far as the presidential primary, the state is providing the PPE, correct?
Yes, but not the hand sanitizer for the voters.
No, I know that. No. Okay, well, just,
Not providing the protective shields. We had to order those ourselves and pay for them.
okay.
Uh-huh.
Okay,
All right.
all right.
Well, we can keep all the hand sanitizers we get from the state and use the rest of them up for us.
Listen, we will do that. It won't go to waste, that's for sure.
Right.
No, I'm sure. Any other issues to talk about?
Not that I know.
This is Mike Ursillo. I just want to commend you on your deliberations today. You were very deliberative and very open-minded, and I think you did a great job.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir.
Now, we had a recommendation that we should list our reasons for why we're recommending moving the referendum.
I think that's simple. I think you just have to mention that you want as many citizens to have the ability to participate as possible in their right, and that this will better ensure that more citizens will be able to exercise that. I think it's that simple.
I agree. I think that's the bottom line. That's why we're here, is to allow as many people who wish to vote to have that opportunity so that we don't disenfranchise anyone.
So if those are just included in the minutes, that'd be fine.
Okay, great.
Good.
Okay, any other comments, thoughts?
No, I think we tried to.
Someone's got their hand up again.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't mean to drag this meeting on, but I just have a point of order question. So the next council meeting is Tuesday. Between that and the actual meeting is our holiday and weekends. The agenda's already been set for that Tuesday meeting. You're going to add this to the agenda, and I know that the general laws of open meetings allows for an emergency meeting to be held, but notice has to be given as soon as practical, and this wouldn't be an emergency meeting. So how are you handling that, Mike?
Yeah, so the answer is that I may have to deal with this directly through the town manager as opposed to the council. Otherwise, we're looking at 48-hour notice, and as you know, weekends and holidays don't count for that 48-hour notice. So this afternoon, I'll work on that with the council manager, the council president, and the town manager, and we'll figure that out.
Yeah, because obviously if the council is going to vote on something, the public has a right to know and has to be open.
Yeah, absolutely, you are correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, then. Well, thank you, Susan and Missy, and thank everyone here. Thank you, Mike and Pat and Helen. And so I hope everyone has a nice Memorial Day weekend. And We'll
Very
see each
good.
other soon.
Yes, I think so. Do you want a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.